Episode 1, the first night it refused. I was there the night the candle refused to die. The chapel had been cold and empty, its stones sweating under the weight of centuries. I remember the rain outside, thick, merciless, hammering the stained glass windows until they wept. I had been tasked, as the youngest priest in the convent, with the simplest of duties: extinguish the candles after Compline, a ritual so ordinary it barely required thought. But that night, nothing was ordinary. I leaned over the altar, lips damp with breath, and blew upon the flame. It flickered, bent low as though it would give in, but then rose again, taller than before, its glow trembling like a living pulse. I tried again, harder. My cheeks burned with the force of it, but the flame clung to the wick with a hunger that mocked me. Frustrated, I pinched the wick between my fingers. The heat seared my skin, but the flame did not yield. It slid between my flesh as though it wasn't made of fire at all, but something far more stubborn, far more sentient. I staggered back, sucking my fingers, watching as the little light steadied itself. It was watching me, I swear it was. The silence in the chapel grew thick. Shadows of crucifixes stretched unnaturally across the walls, bending toward me like accusing arms. The flame hissed, and for the briefest instant I thought I heard it breathe. I fetched the brass snuffer, slamming it down over the candle. For a moment, sweet, triumphant, I thought I'd won. Darkness fell over the altar. But then, inside the metal cone, a faint glow leaked through, as if the flame had burned a hole in the darkness itself. When I lifted the snuffer, the candle flared violently, the light spilling like blood across the stones. My knees buckled. I muttered prayers, the ones drilled into me since childhood, words that once tasted of certainty. Pater Noster, qui es in caelis. But the candle didn't waver. Instead, its flame stretched, long and thin, bending toward me, as if listening. That was when I felt it, the air pressing against my chest, the weight of something ancient leaning in. The flame whispered, not in words, but in a sensation that crawled under my ribs. You cannot end what was never meant to end. I fled the chapel, heart pounding, my cassock clinging to my skin. The rain outside should have drowned all light, but through the crack of the wooden doors I saw it still, burning, stubborn, triumphant, a candle that would not extinguish. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. By dawn, rumors had already spread. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was a curse. But deep down, I knew what I had seen, a flame that had looked back at me, a flame that had chosen to stay. And this was only the beginning. Episode 2, Whispers in the Flame. The second night, the flame began to speak. I wasn't the first to hear it. It was Sister Elena. She had always been known for her discipline, silent, precise, untouched by rumor or vanity. The kind of nun who could kneel for hours on the stone floor without moving, eyes fixed on the crucifix as though her body no longer belonged to her. If such a woman claimed she heard a voice, no one would doubt her. But I was there when it happened. I watched her face shift. At first her lips moved in prayer, the familiar rhythm of the Ave Maria. Then her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open, trembling, as though the words she heard were not hers to repeat. The candle's flame leaned toward her like a serpent uncoiling. Its light quivered, almost playful, almost intimate, brushing her cheek with a glow that no other candle carried. Then Elena gasped. Her hands clutched the rosary at her chest. "It spoke," she whispered. Her voice cracked like a confession dragged out of her throat. "It spoke to me." The rest of us exchanged glances. Some crossed themselves, others stepped back as though proximity alone might draw fire. "What did it say?" I asked, though part of me wished I hadn't. Her eyes found mine, wide and shining with both terror and rapture. "It was him," she said. "It was the Lord. He called my name." But I saw the way her skin shivered, the way her pulse raced in her throat. There was no peace in her, no serenity, only command. That night, Sister Elena did not eat. She stayed in the chapel, kneeling before the unyielding flame. She didn't blink, didn't move, didn't breathe, as though she had become part of the silence that filled those ancient stones. When I tried to touch her shoulder, she flinched violently, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. "Don't interrupt him." Him. She meant the candle. I wanted to believe she was mistaken, that stress and exhaustion had loosened her mind. But when I returned at midnight, The sight froze my blood. The flame was not still. It bent sideways, as if pressed by invisible wind, leaning into her ear. She was nodding like a child being scolded. I dared to whisper her name, but she didn't hear me. She was repeating something under her breath, the words muffled, alien, wet like a tongue trying to form Latin backwards. I didn't stay. Cowardice drove me out into the storm. Yet even from my chamber, I heard it, faint, low, like two voices speaking beneath stone. Hers, and something else. By dawn, Elena's eyes were bloodshot, her lips cracked, but she smiled. Not the smile of a woman at peace, but the smile of one who has surrendered her will. "He spoke to me all night," she said, "and tonight, he wants to speak to you." And when she said it, I felt the flame's heat crawling across my chest, as though it already knew my name. Episode 3, The Candle's Shadow. The third night, it wasn't the flame that unsettled us, it was the shadow. Shadows are supposed to obey. They follow, they mimic, they disappear when light is gone. But this one refused to belong to anyone. I first noticed it during Vespers. The chapel was lit only by that single cursed candle. Its glow painted long silhouettes across the stone floor, bent crucifixes, crooked pews, the hunched forms of weary nuns. All was as it should be, until my eyes caught a figure that wasn't there. It stood at the back wall, taller than any of us, stretched unnaturally thin, its head tilted downward as if studying us. But when I turned to look, there was no one, just cold air and silence. Yet when I faced forward again, the shadow remained, leaning closer, as though curious. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to join the hymn, but the words felt heavy in my mouth, dragged down by something unseen. Sister Elena sang louder, as if to drown it out, but her eyes never left the flame. Later, when the others retired, I lingered. I needed to prove to myself that fear had tricked me, that shadows could not move on their own. The chapel was empty, save for the candle. Its flame flickered innocently, almost smug. I watched its glow crawl across the stones. The shadow appeared again, thick, blacker than the night outside. This time it moved, one step forward. The sound was not of feet, but of stone grinding against stone. My breath caught in my chest. I whispered the name of Christ, but the syllables wilted in the air. The shadow tilted its head toward me, and though it had no eyes, no face, I felt its stare sink into me, pressing against my ribs like a hand searching for my heartbeat. Then slowly, it raised an arm. I froze. The arm stretched toward the crucifix above the altar, and as it touched the wall, a charred handprint burned into the stone. Smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of ash and old flesh. That was when I ran. But even in my chambers, with the door bolted and my body trembling under coarse blankets, I saw it. On the far wall, in the faint moonlight, another shadow lay stretched across my room, a shadow that was not mine. I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't pray, because deep down I knew, shadows don't wander unless they belong to something. And if this shadow had no master in the room, then its master was the flame, and the flame had chosen to move. Episode 4, The Priest Who Lied. The fourth night, the candle punished a lie. It was Father Mateo who dared to test it. He was older than most, stubborn as stone, and quick to laugh at superstition. For days he had mocked our fear, calling us children who trembled at shadows. "A candle is wax and wick," he said, "nothing more." But deep down, I saw his unease, the way his hand trembled when passing the chapel door, the way he looked too long at the scorch mark burned into the altar wall. That night, he stood before the flame with a sneer. The rest of us gathered in silence, our rosaries clutched tight, our prayers stuck in our throats. The candle glowed steady, bright as an eye that refused to blink. "Very well," Father Mateo said, his voice loud, challenging. "If this is truly the voice of heaven, let it judge me." He pressed one hand against his chest, the other raised toward the flame, and spoke. "I am without sin." The lie slid from his lips as smooth as oil. For a moment, the silence seemed to hold it, stretching the words across the cold air. Then the flame reacted. It did not flicker, it roared. The wick bent violently toward him, the fire flaring so high it brushed the crucifix above the altar. The gold leaf blistered, curling as though the wood beneath was alive and writhing. Father Mateo gasped, clutching at his robes as they caught a spark that should not have leapt that far. We rushed forward, but something invisible held us back. a wall of heat pressing against our skin. The flame hissed, a sound sharper than any serpent, and then it struck. The light surged outward, piercing through Mateo's garments, searing into his flesh. When he tore his cassock open, we saw it, a brand carved across his chest, burned into the skin as though written by the hand of fire itself. It was a cross, crooked, ugly, made of raw, blistering flesh. Mateo collapsed, screaming words that broke into incoherence. The flame steadied, shrinking back to its small, steady glow, as though nothing had happened. But the stench of scorched skin lingered, clinging to the stones like a new kind of incense. When at last we carried him out, he clutched my arm, his eyes wild, his breath ragged. "It knows," he rasped. "Every false word, every hidden sin, it will burn us all." He didn't return to the chapel after that. None of us blamed him. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mark, fresh, red, alive, as if the candle had signed his body with its judgment. That night, we all understood something terrible. The flame did not crave worship. It demanded truth. And in a house of priests, truth is often the rarest thing of all. Episode 5. The Nun Who Stayed Too Long. The fifth night, the candle claimed its first body. Sister Magdalena was known for her devotion. She prayed longer than anyone, fasted more severely, and often spoke of sacrificing comfort for the glory of heaven. To her, fear was a weakness, and so she lingered before the flame when the rest of us had gone to bed. I remember seeing her kneel at the altar, her shadow stretching endlessly along the stones, her lips moving in silent prayer. I warned her gently, "Sister, come. The night is deep, and the candle is not what you think." She only smiled, eyes locked on the flame. "If this light is from God, why should I turn away? And if it is not, then who am I to fear? A servant of Christ has nothing to hide." Those were her last words to me. At dawn, when we entered the chapel, we found her still there. Her body was upright, frozen in the same kneeling posture, hands clasped in eternal devotion. At first we thought she had fallen asleep, but the silence was wrong, too absolute, too heavy. I approached, heart pounding. The closer I came, the colder the air became, until every breath stung my throat. When I touched her shoulder, I recoiled. Her skin was stone, not cold flesh, not death's pallor, stone. Her face had hardened into pale marble, eyes wide, unblinking, with the reflection of the candle's flame trapped forever in her pupils. Even her rosary, entwined between her fingers, had fused into her form, beads petrified as if carved by a sculptor. Behind her, the candle burned on. Its flame swayed gently, mocking us with its calmness, casting Magdalena's unyielding figure in cruel relief. We tried to move her. We pushed, pulled, begged heaven for strength, but her body would not budge from the floor. She was part of the chapel now, a statue born of faith and fire. Sister Elena fell to her knees, weeping. "She has been chosen," she cried. "He has preserved her, made her eternal." But I could not agree. The terror in Magdalena's eyes was not devotion. It was realization, frozen at the exact moment she understood what she had done. She had stayed too long. She had listened too much. That night, none of us dared remain in the chapel after prayers. We left quickly, shadows darting like guilty thieves. But as I shut the heavy wooden door, I looked back once more. The candle glowed steadily, its flame bowing slightly toward the stone figure of Magdalena. And for just a second, I thought I saw her lips move. Episode 6. Confessions at the Flame. The sixth night, the candle began to demand confessions. It started with whispers among the brothers. They said sins burned less in the soul when spoken in its presence. That perhaps the unyielding flame was a shortcut to absolution, holier than the confessional, stronger than penance. By dusk, a line had formed before the altar, each man and woman waiting to pour their secrets into the glow. I watched in silence, heart sinking. I knew what the candle was. It was no priest, no God, no redeemer. But fear twists faith, and faith twists fear until they become the same. And so they confessed. The first was Brother Luis. His voice shook as he admitted stealing bread, as if he expected the flame to devour him. But it didn't. It merely flickered gently, casting a forgiving light on his tears. He walked away relieved, whispering gracias a Dios. The second, Sister Beatrice, confessed envy. The flame wavered, then steadied. She too left lighter, smiling through trembling lips. Hope spread. One by one they stepped forward, voices spilling out decades of hidden shame, adultery, blasphemy, violence, all whispered into the flame as if it were a listening ear. Each time, the candle glowed warmly, almost lovingly. But then came Diego. He was a mason, a layman who worked with us to restore the crumbling stones of the convent. He was not a man of prayer, nor one of humility. He knelt before the candle, his hands shaking, sweat dripping down his brow. His confession was not soft, not whispered. He shouted it, a raw wound torn open. "I killed her." The chapel froze. His voice echoed against the vaulted ceilings. "I killed my wife. I buried her under the orchard, and I told God I was sorry, but he never answered. So now I confess to you." The flame's response was immediate. It flared with a violent hiss, swelling high enough to lick the beams of the roof. The air turned hot, unbearable. Diego screamed, clutching his chest as the fire leapt, not outward but inward. The glow slid across the floor, into his shadow, crawling up his body like molten chains. We tried to run, but our legs refused to move. The chapel held us captive as witnesses. His skin blistered, blackened, split. The smell was unforgettable, charred meat and incense tangled together. His screams cut short when his lungs filled with fire. And then, silence. When the flame calmed, Diego's body lay still, collapsed before the altar. But his mouth was frozen open, stretched unnaturally wide, as if the last thing he had done was not scream, but let something crawl out of him. The candle returned to its gentle glow as if nothing had happened. But the message was clear. Lies it punished, sins it judged, murders it devoured. That night, none of us dared speak. For the first time, I wondered if silence itself was the only safe confession left. Episode 7, The Candle That Bled. The seventh night, the candle began to bleed. It happened without warning. One moment the flame danced in silence. The next, a thick red drop slid down the white wax. It wasn't melted sap. It was blood. Dark, warm, sticky. The sight of it made the entire chapel fall silent. I remember the first gasp. Sister Elena clutching her throat, whispering, "The blood of Christ." But even as she spoke, the scent betrayed her. It wasn't wine or holy mystery. It was iron, raw, metallic, the smell of slaughter. We gathered closer, as though drawn by a force we couldn't resist. More drops fell, staining the brass holder, trailing down the altar stone like veins seeking escape. The flame did not falter. It seemed proud, stronger, as if it fed on its own bleeding. Then came the visions. Brother Thomas touched the blood with trembling fingers. He raised it to his lips before I could stop him. His eyes rolled back instantly, his body convulsing as if struck by lightning. We dragged him away, but his mouth kept moving, spilling words in a tongue I'd never heard. Harsh, broken syllables that twisted Latin into something unholy. When he finally stilled, his eyes opened wide. He whispered, "I saw them, angels." Their wings torn, their mouths sewn shut. They were falling, and the fire was waiting. He refused to say more. But the candle wasn't finished. The blood flowed thicker now, pooling at its base. Some dropped to their knees to lap it up like animals, convinced it was sacred. Others fled in terror. I stayed, frozen, unable to turn away. The pool spread across the stones, and I saw it clearly. The blood moved against gravity, crawling, branching into shapes, letters, words. I stared as they formed beneath the altar. Latin, but wrong, distorted. They twisted into a command, Adora sanguinem, worship the blood. My stomach turned. I tried to shout, to warn them, but my voice was swallowed by the air itself. Sister Elena was already kneeling in the pool, her habit stained red. She lifted her hands, face bathed in crimson, and cried out, "He speaks! He calls us to drink!" The others hesitated, torn between horror and devotion. That was when the flame roared higher, showering sparks like droplets of fire. Those who knelt did not flinch. Those who fled slammed the chapel doors, locking themselves out. I stayed. I wish I could say it was courage, but no, it was paralysis. I was trapped between the fear of fleeing and the terror of obeying. The candle bled until the floor was slick, until the altar was painted like a slaughterhouse, and through it all, the flame swayed gently, almost merrily, as though bleeding was its natural state. When at last the flow stopped, silence returned. But the message lingered in my bones. The flame was not light, not warmth, it was hunger. And now, it had tasted blood. Episode 8, The Pilgrims Arrive. The 8th night, the candle was no longer ours alone. Rumors had spread beyond the convent walls. Some said it was a miracle, a light that could never die, a beacon of God himself. Others whispered it was a curse, a wound in the fabric of heaven that bled into our world. Whatever the truth, they came. Pilgrims. Dozens at first, then hundreds. They arrived with muddy boots, weathered faces, and desperate eyes, pressing their hands against the heavy wooden doors of our chapel. They begged to see the flame. Some offered money, some offered relics, some even offered their own blood. All wanted one thing: to kneel before the candle that would not extinguish. The abbot tried to bar them, but desperation is stronger than walls. At dusk, the gates broke under the weight of bodies pushing inward. They flooded the chapel like a tide. The air grew heavy with sweat, incense, and feverish whispers. And the candle, oh, the candle, welcomed them. Its flame flared brighter as each new face entered, casting light into every corner, chasing shadows until none of us could look away. The pilgrims gasped, wept, fell to their knees. Some began to pray aloud. Others tore at their garments, pressing their bare skin to the blood-stained stones as if to drink the holiness through their flesh. At first it seemed harmless, a gathering of faith, a frenzy of devotion. But then the laughter began. It was not joy, it was not holy, it was the laughter of broken minds, spilling from mouths that could no longer contain their awe. A woman shrieked with delight, clawing at her face until blood streamed down her cheeks. A man lay flat on the floor, shaking, giggling through cracked lips as he whispered, I see him in the fire." Children cried out, not in fear but in imitation, high, piercing laughs that echoed like flutes in a madhouse. I tried to push through the crowd, to stop them, but the press of bodies was unbearable. Every pilgrim wanted to be closer, to touch the altar, to smear themselves with the blood that still stained the floor. Their devotion was a hunger, and the candle fed it. The flame bent in every direction, as if whispering to each soul individually. I saw eyes glaze over, pupils dilated, lips moving in prayers I could not recognize. They were not speaking to God, they were answering the flame. And then silence, sudden, terrifying. Every pilgrim turned their head at once toward me, hundreds of eyes, wide and glassy, reflecting the fire. They spoke together, voices overlapping in perfect unison. He is here. The flame swelled, stretching taller than a man, splitting into tongues that licked the ceiling beams. The heat pressed against us like a furnace. And in that moment I realized something dreadful. We had not been guarding the candle. We had been feeding it. Episode 9, The Candle's Commandments. The 9th night, the candle began to write. No hand-held chalk, no brush-touched stone, yet words appeared on the chapel walls. They bled from the cracks between stones, dark and wet, like ink made from marrow. The pilgrims gasped as the letters formed, crooked but deliberate, shimmering faintly in the candlelight. At first we thought they were fragments of scripture, familiar words, Latin prayers, verses from the Gospels. But then the sentences twisted, reshaped themselves into something new, something wrong. By the time the last letter dried, 10 commands stood before us, carved not by man but by fire and blood. They called them the Candle's Commandments. I will never forget the first 3. Speak no truth unless the flame allows it. Do not pray to silence, for silence denies the fire. Give blood willingly, that the light may grow. The crowd fell to their knees, murmuring, trembling. Some wept as though heaven itself had opened before them, but my stomach turned. These were not commandments from God. They were inversions, perversions, holy words burned into blasphemy. Father Mateo tried to stop them. His voice thundered, hoarse with anger. This is not scripture. This is the devil mocking us. He raised his crucifix high, the wood shaking in his hand. The candle answered. Its flame lunged toward him like a serpent striking. In an instant, the crucifix melted, dripping molten silver that burned holes in the stone floor. Mateo screamed and fell back, his branded chest glowing faintly as if the mark had been reignited from within. The pilgrims did not retreat. They surged forward, touching the walls, tracing the bloody commandments with their fingers, smearing them onto their own skin like tattoos. A woman carved the third commandment into her arm with a shard of glass, laughing as blood ran freely down her wrist. I wanted to drag them away, to shout, to fight, but my voice died in my throat, because when I turned toward the altar, I saw the flame bend toward me again, not in anger, in expectation. A new line crawled across the wall, wet and glistening, written just for me. "You will keep the last commandment." My blood froze. I scanned the list in horror. The last commandment had not yet been revealed. One by one, the words formed, deliberate, agonizingly slow, as though savoring the moment. And when it was finished, I felt the chapel tilt beneath me, my faith slipping like sand through my fingers. Extinguish flesh, not fire. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some tore at their own skin, convinced this was salvation. I staggered backward, choking on fear. For the first time, I knew with certainty, the candle was no miracle. It was a mouth, a hunger, a new scripture written in blood. And it had begun to preach. Episode 10, When God Looked Away. The 10th night, the flame went out. Only for 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds felt like eternity. We were gathered in the chapel, the air suffocating with sweat, blood, and whispered prayers to the fire. Pilgrims clung to the walls where the commandments still dripped like wounds. Nuns trembled, their rosaries clicking too fast, too desperate. The candle burned as it always had, steady, defiant, until suddenly, without warning, the light vanished. Darkness swallowed us whole. It wasn't the kind of darkness that comes when a candle dies. No, this was thicker, heavier, a darkness with weight pressing against our chests, smothering our lungs. And then, within that black silence, we heard it. A scream, not human, not earthly. It wasn't a cry of pain, but of something greater, something infinite being torn. It echoed from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through bone, making my teeth ache. Every pilgrim clamped their hands over their ears, but the sound was inside us, inside our heads, inside our prayers. Then just as suddenly the flame reignited. Its light was blinding, far too bright for a single wick. The chapel glowed as though set aflame, shadows writhing like living things. And yet, even in the return of light, we could feel it, the absence, the silence that had stared back at us during those 3 seconds. God had looked away. That was the thought that poisoned my heart. I could see it written on every face around me. Some wept in despair. Others laughed with hollow voices, convinced that the flame's endurance was proof that God had abandoned us for something greater. Sister Elena collapsed to her knees, clutching the blood-stained floor. "He has withdrawn his gaze," she cried. "We are his chosen now. We are the only light he leaves behind." But I knew. It wasn't that we had been chosen. We had been discarded. The commandments on the wall began to shimmer as if freshly written. The blood pulsed, glowing faintly in rhythm with the flame. And a new line appeared beneath the 10th commandment. "Because he turned away, you will turn to me." The pilgrims roared, their voices unified, chanting as though they had rehearsed it their whole lives. "Adora flammam, adora flammam." Worship the flame, worship the flame. I pressed my back against the wall, bile rising in my throat. My prayers faltered, shattering like brittle glass. For the first time, I didn't know if heaven was listening. I didn't know if it had ever listened at all. But I knew one thing: the candle had taken his place, and there was no going back. Episode 11, The Bishop's Verdict. The 11th night, Rome sent judgment. Bishop Alvaro arrived draped in crimson vestments, a gilded cross gleaming against his chest. His carriage brought not only the weight of his authority, but the last hope that someone, anyone, could end this blasphemy. The pilgrims knelt as he entered, pressing their foreheads to the blood-soaked stones. His presence silenced even the most fevered voices. He did not kneel. He did not tremble. He walked straight to the altar, his eyes fixed on the candle's defiant flame. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint stirrings of relief. Surely a man who bore the authority of the church would see through this deception. Bishop Alvaro raised his voice, stern and unyielding. "This light is no miracle," he declared. "It is corruption, a wound in creation, and I will seal it in the name of Christ." The crowd murmured, divided between awe and outrage. Sister Elena clutched her rosary so tightly her knuckles split, whispering, "He does not understand." The bishop lifted his cross high, stepping close to the flame. Its light danced across his face, revealing no fear. He brought forth a vial of holy water, blessed in Rome itself, and poured it over the wick. The flame hissed, but did not die. Instead, it grew. The holy water turned to steam, rising in a foul mist that smelled of rust and sulfur. Alvaro did not falter. He pressed the cross against the flame, its golden edges glowing hot. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. The words never finished. The cross melted in his hand, dripping molten gold that burned holes into the altar. The bishop cried out, but not from pain, from horror. His eyes were fixed on his chest. A glow spread beneath his vestments, right over his heart. We tore the cloth away, and I saw it. The same mark branded onto Father Mateo, but larger, deeper. A crooked cross seared into his flesh, glowing like hot coal. He fell to his knees, clutching at the wound, but the candle's flame bent toward him, feeding on his agony. His voice cracked, not with prayer but with despair. It mocks him. It mocks the cross itself. The pilgrims erupted. Some shouted curses at the bishop. Others praised the candle for proving stronger than Rome. Their chants shook the chapel. Adora flammam, adora flammam. I rushed to Alvaro's side, but his hands pushed me away. His eyes, bloodshot, broken, locked on mine. This flame will not be quenched by holy water, nor by scripture. It is older, deeper. You must run. Do you hear me? Run. But there was nowhere to run. The doors had been barred from outside, sealed by the pilgrims themselves. The bishop's verdict had been clear, but the candle's response was louder. It had judged Rome and found it wanting. Episode 12, the night of 33 flames. The 12th night, the candle multiplied. We gathered in the chapel, still shaken from the bishop's fall. His body lay pale in the crypt below, chest scarred with that burning cross. Fear and frenzy clung to the air like smoke. The pilgrims no longer whispered, they chanted. They pressed their bloodied hands against the walls, repeating the commandments as if scripture. And then it happened. The single flame flickered once, twice, and split. Not into sparks, but into smaller flames, each sliding across the altar like drops of liquid fire. They crawled down the steps, spreading across the floor, multiplying with every breath we took. There were 33 of them when it ended. Each flame rooted itself into nothing. No wick, no wax. They burned on the stone as though the floor itself had veins of fuel. And as we stared in horror, the bodies came. Corpses. From beneath the chapel, from the crypt, from graves left forgotten in the earth. They rose, dragging broken bones and rotted habits, mouths slack and eyeless sockets glowing faintly. Each corpse carried one of the 33 flames in its mouth, the fire burning where a tongue should have been. The air filled with a sound I cannot forget, a hymn, not sung by us, sung by them, the dead. Their voices were thick, guttural, yet in perfect unison, chanting in Latin that was wrong, twisted, inverted. The melody was familiar, dies irae, but every note rang backwards, like time itself had been reversed. Some pilgrims fell prostrate, believing this to be the revelation promised. Others screamed and fled, clawing at the sealed doors until their nails tore free. I stood frozen, my throat raw with unspoken prayers. The dead marched slowly to the pews, sitting as if they were a congregation, their flaming mouths moving in unison. And with every verse, the chapel shook, dust rained from the rafters, stones groaned. Then one corpse rose, its jaw cracked open wider than bone should allow, flame spilling out like a second tongue. In a voice deeper than thunder, it declared, 33 for 33, flesh for flame, life for life. The crowd erupted in panic. Some begged for mercy, others offered their blood willingly, believing sacrifice would spare them. But the corpses did not move to strike. They simply sang, waiting. And that was when I realized 33 was no random number. It was the age of Christ when he died. The candle wasn't mocking us anymore. It was rewriting the gospel. The flames did not fade with dawn. They remained, burning in the mouths of the dead, watching us as we trembled. And deep inside me, a truth gnawed like rot. This was no longer about one candle. It was about the fire that wanted to be worshipped in place of God, and it had found its congregation. Episode 13, the flame that chose. The 13th night, the flame chose me. I had always known it was watching. From the first night it refused to die, to the blood that dripped from its body, to the corpses that sang its hymns. Its attention lingered like heat against my skin. But that night, it stopped pretending. The chapel was a furnace. 33 flames burned in 33 mouths, the dead still seated in the pews like grotesque parishioners. The pilgrims knelt before them, their chants echoing against the walls. Adora flammam, worship the flame. I tried to keep my eyes on the floor, to lose myself in silence, but the central flame, the original one, rose higher, bending toward me like a candle drawn to breath. The air thickened. Every shadow in the room leaned in my direction. And then, it spoke. Not to the crowd, not to the corpses, to me. You will keep the last commandment. The words weren't sound. They were heat, pressing against my chest, burning themselves into my marrow. My vision blurred, and I saw it. My body engulfed in fire, flesh melting, bones glowing red like coals. But in that vision, I wasn't dying. I was alive. Alive in a way no mortal man should be. I stumbled back, shaking my head, whispering prayers that tasted like ash. No, not me, not me. But the pilgrims surged forward, hands grasping, voices crying out, "He has chosen, the keeper of the flame!" Their eyes shone with madness. Their devotion twisted into frenzy. Some tried to touch me, to smear my skin with blood from the altar. Others bowed, pressing their foreheads to my feet. I fought through them, desperate to escape, but the corpses blocked the doors. Their mouths glowed, 33 tongues of fire burning brighter with every heartbeat. Then it happened. The flame leapt from the altar, not outward but inward. I felt it pierce my chest, not like fire, but like breath-filling lungs that were not mine. My heart seized, my body convulsed, heat spread through my veins, searing, purifying, corrupting. I collapsed, clutching at my chest, screaming as the fire rooted itself inside me. My eyes burned, literally burned, until the world was seen through a haze of red. I could hear every voice, every whisper, every thought in the room. But above them all, I heard the flame. "You are mine." When I rose to my feet, silence fell. Every corpse bowed its head. Every pilgrim dropped to their knees. Even Sister Elena stared with wide, trembling eyes, whispering, "Chosen." I wanted to deny it, to scream that I was still myself. But my reflection in the brass candlestick betrayed me. My eyes were not my own anymore. They glowed like embers. And in that moment I knew the truth. I was no longer the witness. I was the vessel. Episode 14. The Candle's Betrayal. The 14th night, I learned the flame was never what it claimed to be. I had carried it inside me for a single day, and already my body was not my own. My blood ran hot as boiling oil. My veins glowed faintly beneath my skin, and every breath reeked of smoke. Pilgrims bowed as I passed, whispering "Keeper" with reverence, their eyes gleaming with devotion that was no longer for God, but for the thing that burned within me. At first, I told myself it was still holy, that I was chosen to bear a burden like Moses with his tablets, or Paul with his visions. But the truth came when I prayed. Kneeling before the crucifix, I begged for guidance. My words fell heavy, desperate. "Lord, deliver me from this fire. If this is your will, grant me strength. If it is not, silence it." The answer came, not from heaven, but from the heat twisting in my chest. "He is gone." He turned his face away, and I remained. The voice was not thunder, it was not love. It was the hiss of kindling catching flame, dry and merciless. I froze. "Who are you?" I whispered. The flame laughed. It was a terrible sound, like crackling wood, like flesh blistering. "Not what you prayed to, not what you feared." I was cast down when he banished the others, but he could not kill me. I burned then, and I burned still. My stomach dropped. It wasn't God, it wasn't even a servant. It was what had been exiled, what had fallen. "Why choose me?" I asked, though my voice trembled with the answer I already feared. "Because you believed, because you watched and did not turn away, because you carried doubt like oil waiting for fire. You are not chosen by heaven, you are kindled by me." I staggered to my feet, bile rising in my throat. Betrayal scorched deeper than flame. All this time the pilgrims had bled themselves dry. The sisters had prayed themselves hoarse, believing we served a miracle. But we were feeding something cast out of paradise, something that wore God's silence as its crown. I tried to scream the truth to them, but when I opened my mouth only smoke poured out. My voice was gone, stolen, replaced by the hiss of fire. The congregation cheered as if it were prophecy. Sister Elena knelt before me, tears of joy streaking her face. "He speaks," she cried. "The flame has chosen its prophet. No, not prophet, not servant, prisoner." And as the flame laughed inside me, I understood the depth of its betrayal. It had never wanted to be worshipped. It wanted to replace him. Episode 15, The Last Extinguishing. The 15th night, someone tried to end it. By then, the convent was no longer a house of God. It was a furnace. The walls dripped with soot, the pews blackened with ash, and the air burned in our lungs as though every breath carried embers. Pilgrims still chanted, corpses still sat in silent devotion, and the commandments bled on the walls like open wounds. But hope, fragile, foolish hope, rose in the form of one man, Father Mateo. His body was ruined, his chest scarred by the crooked cross the flame had branded. He had been silent for nights, broken by fear. But on that final evening, he staggered into the chapel with a look I had not seen since before the candle had awoken. Resolve. "I will be the last sacrifice," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "Not to feed it, to starve it." The crowd screamed at him, some in protest, others in prayer. The flame hissed violently inside me, writhing, trying to seize control of my limbs. It knew what he intended. Mateo knelt before the altar. His eyes found mine, not the flames. And for one instant I saw a plea. Remember me as a man, not as fuel. Then, with a single motion, he pulled his cassock tight around himself, pressed his hands into the fire, and let it devour him. The scream tore the chapel in two. Flesh cracked, bones split, smoke billowed until we choked on his sacrifice. The pilgrims wailed, some clawing their faces, others praising the light as if his death were a holy gift. And then, silence. The flame shrank. For the first time since that cursed night began, it dimmed. A guttering, fragile glow. I felt it falter inside me, felt its grip loosen like claws withdrawing from bone. My chest heaved with sudden emptiness. For a moment I believed it was over, that Mateo's death had worked, that the last extinguishing had come. But hope is cruel. The candle flared again, not smaller but greater. The 33 flames roared, the corpses stood, and the very stones of the chapel glowed red as though fire ran in their veins. Mateo's sacrifice had not killed it, it had fed it. And then the voice came, louder than ever, burning the marrow of every soul present. "Flesh dies, flame does not. You cannot extinguish what was never lit." I collapsed, clutching my chest, weeping smoke instead of tears. Around me, the pilgrims rejoiced, blinded by devotion. The dead sang louder. The commandments bled darker, and the flame spread higher, licking the rafters as though the sky itself was next. Mateo's body was ash, his faith consumed, and I understood at last. There would be no extinguishing, not tonight, not ever. The candle had won, and its light would burn forever.
Epilogue, The Flame That Remains. The convent is gone now. It burned to the ground in a single night. The fire spreading faster than hands could carry water, faster than prayers could rise. By dawn, nothing stood but blackened stone and a scorched crucifix half buried in ash. The pilgrims died singing. The sisters died praying. The dead, I cannot say they died at all. And yet, the flame did not perish with the walls. I walked among the ruins when the embers cooled. My cassock clung to me, heavy with soot and smoke. My skin blistered. My chest still pulsed with heat, though the fire inside me had dulled to an ember. I thought, foolishly, that perhaps it had left me, that I was free. But freedom is a lie. At the center of the rubble, beneath collapsed beams and shattered stone, it waited. The candle, unbroken, unscarred. Its wax was white, impossibly clean, as though no flame had ever touched it. But the wick, the wick burned steadily, small, calm, eternal, and it looked at me. I dropped to my knees, not in worship, not in devotion, but in despair. "Why?" I begged. My voice cracked, thin from smoke and grief. "Why this? Why us?" The flame swayed, and the answer seared through me without words. "Because I can." Because he looked away. Because all that remains is fire. I wanted to crush it, to drown it in ash, to bury it beneath stone. But my body betrayed me. My hands shook, not from fear, but from reverence I did not choose. The ember in my chest glowed hotter, aligning with the flame, tethering me to its will. I fled the ruins that day, not because I was free, but because I carried it with me. Wherever I walk, the air warms unnaturally. Shadows bend toward me, and at night, when I close my eyes, I hear the whispers, not prayers, not hymns, commandments, new ones, written in the marrow of my bones. I no longer dream of God. I dream of fire. I write this now in the hope that someone, somewhere, will understand. That perhaps another will find a way to do what we could not, extinguish it. But if you find the candle, beware. Do not look too long. Do not listen when it calls your name. For it is patient. It has eternity. And the flame that would not die still burns.